Hey guys, Kreyton, Republic Echelon again here. Obviously, Harbinger. Um, we're going to be doing a basic guide on just the classes in general. We're not going to go into one specific class. We're not. In fact, all this is going to be just on this character select screen. And what it is just going to show you. Okay, This is what the game has to offer. This is where they go, and this is how they rate. So, for instance, we have the Sage here. And the Sage has three different specs we can do. We can do 2 DPS specs and 1 healing spec. So that's kind of be pretty much how the whole this whole guide's gonna go. Like I said, it's just for the basic information of, all right, maybe I'm new to the game, maybe I'm trying to check out the game, or all right, I made one character, but I'm not really enjoying it. Let's see what else there is before I jump ship and try something different here. So, first thing we're going to do is we are going to talk about some DPS, which everybody loves, DPS. So, we're going to go melee, and then we're going to go ranged. So, DPS, we have for melee, we're going to have Sentinel, or the Sith counterpart, Marauder. And then we will have the Guardian, or Juggernaut, Shadow, or Assassin, Vanguard, or Bounty Hunter, Power Tech, more like it, and Scoundrel, or the Operative. And those are all your main melee kind of classes that we have right now in the game. Sentinel or the Marauder in the Watchman or the Dot spec is definitely the highest parsing, and what all that means is in recorded damage done in the game, it has the highest output. Not to say that none of these other ones are going to compare. It's just a fact that the Watchman has the highest. Next to that is going to be the Carnage, Marauder, or Sentinel Combat. Also, it's good. You can do good damage, but it's no Watchman. It's more of the burst spec, most commonly seen in PvP. And then there's the concentration one, or Fury, which I don't really see much people playing as ever. Like ever. Doesn't mean that you can't play it. I'm just saying that, you might not be so happy with what you get. Next thing that we're gonna look at is we're gonna be looking at, unfortunately, the Vanguard or the Power Tech. That's kind of the next guy here on the board, which we're gonna go Jiyoung, my Power Tech Vanguard. They have 3 different specs we can do. We can do a tank spec and 2 DPS specs. There's Plasma Tech, which is the better of the two. Different options that we have, and then we have Tactics, which is the lowest parsing. I, of course, play Tactics, and it's a little bit more of the burstier spec, so I'm going to be able to do a lot of damage right now, but it's going to fall off, and it's harder to maintain that damage as the fight goes on because just a lot of averages. And the Plasma Tech, has a little bit more on the dots, and so it does edge out Tactics. It's no question on that one. So that's it for the Vanguard. Next we have Shadow, Serenity, and Infiltration. And unlike the Vanguard, Shadow, Serenity, and Infiltration actually, even though Serenity is higher, they're close. They're probably the closer to in as damage total max output in parsing that can be done. Yes, some people can do probably better in Serenity or Hatred if you're an assassin, and other people might argue that Infiltration or Deception is better as Shadow. But facts matter is Serenity is a dot spec, Shadow is the infiltration spec. It's 2 DPS. It also is one of the tanks in the game, and so it's the stealthy class, so it does have a little bit of you know raid fun when you are playing as it. You can help along with the stealth reses, but unfortunately, you only get the one res in like 15 minutes or whatever it's going to be. But it is handy to have a shadow in there for, you know, if you know that's going to be bad, or, you never know when they ninja something and they res and they save the raid because they res somebody. So that's always great to have. The next melee DPS we're going to talk about is the Guardian, or Juggernaut. Can't believe I forgot Juggernaut. And it, like the Shadow and the Vanguard, has 2 DPS specs and a tank spec. There's Vigilance, Guardian, and there is... Can't believe I'm drawing a blank on this right now. Focus, or Rage Juggernaut, and then you got the Vengeance or Vigilance, and that's really the more popular spec that I've ever seen. It used to kind of be both in PvP and PvE. They both have a little bit, you can get love from both ways, and I do believe it is the dot spec, but it is far, as a parsing spec goes, it's far superior to Focus. Like I said, I've never seen anybody play Focus before, so doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. I just don't see it. Next, we're going to go the range, and we're going to talk about commandos, sages, gunslingers, or, snipers, mercenaries, stuff like that. So, the very first one we're going to talk about is commando. It has, like every class in the game, 3 specs, 2 DPS, 1 is healing. You have your dot spec, you have your burst spec, and the dot spec assault is the least played. I do believe people do play it in PvP. It's the one that I enjoy the most out of the commando. And then there is the gunnery, or more or less the burst spec. And I call it the burst spec because it doesn't really heavily rely on its dots, where your dot spec, you have to make sure you're applying dots, otherwise you're not doing damage. So that's where that's coming from. Assault spec is, in my opinion, good. And then gunnery commandos, there's some people out there who play gunnery commandos, and they are great. So, depending on what you want to do, it's really okay. Assault spec is a little bit more complicated, so it's in complexity of rotation. It rates a little bit higher than the gunnery. Gunnery, you can do a huge amount of damage. Don't get me wrong on that. So, and then it's a little bit... It can be a little bit easier on the rotation. I have heard some people have a little bit problems with resources where other people don't. So it's just something you have to test out for yourself, and each play style, however you like to play, is going to definitely change, whether your assault spec or the gunnery spec. Next we're going to do is gunslinger, which unfortunately has been on the bad end of the nerf stick here for a while. Here's my gunslinger here. They're like the sentinel, where they're pure DPS. They don't get the love of a tank spec, obviously, or a heal spec, obviously, because of the way the advanced class works. And they let's see here, we got gunslinger, saboteur. Right now, currently, is the better of the 3. And then we got dirty fighting. And then we have my favorite, which I do believe is the lowest damage output in the game, of course, marksman. And so those are your 3 options that you get there. I find marksman to be fun because it feels fast-paced. It feels like you're doing a lot of different abilities, but you're not having to... you're not really burning through your resources all that much, and it just feels faster paced. It's more engaging for me. You do have to be in cover more, so you're not nearly as... you won't have as much movement as the other 2, but that's my my personal preference on it. But it does significantly, it is significantly worse in DPS compared to the other two specs. No question, no argument on that. And then last we're going to look at the Sage. I thought I was going to have a Sage over here. We'll do that one. And it has 3. 1's healer, 2 DPS, dot spec, burst spec. Dot spec is balance, which can do a quite a bit of damage, a really good amount of damage. It's also more popular in PvP, but it definitely is very effective in endgame raiding. And then there's the telekinetic side of it, and it's more of the burst spec. It is good in PvP from my experience. It's not phenomenal, but you can do good damage. And then in endgame raiding, it's more seen as like a AoE spec, because you do have a couple abilities that do a lot of AoE, so it's kind of nice to have in the group. But when you're trying to crowd control or CC a lot of, some people or some NPCs in the game, a Sage who isn't fully aware of what's going on kind of hinders you, because when they hit telekinetic wave, they break the CC, and you're like, why do we CC in the first place? I like telekinetics because it's a faster pace. It's kind of like combat, where it just feels like I'm, maybe my numbers are showing that I'm doing average numbers, but it feels like I'm doing a lot because it's kind of violent. There's a lot of things that are lighting up and saying, hey, click me, do that, so it's quite nice for me. The balance is very good. You can do a ton of damage. I mean, it's higher rated than telekinetics, so you can do a ton of damage there, and still really enjoy playing, and do very good in PvP and very good in PvE, and have your raid benefit from having a Sage in the group, which is always good. And the last two I touched on it last three, not two. Last three I touched on very basic. We got the tanks Shadow, Vanguard, and Guardian, and my in my rating of ease to play. Guardian's easier to play than Vanguard, and Vanguard's easier to play than Shadow. Guardian is more of a I'm gonna tank the boss. Vanguard and Shadow can tank the boss, but they're all they have they're a little bit better at grabbing groups of ads, but doesn't mean most endgame ops, when you have two tanks, they both have to do their job, and the job requires either grabbing ads or tanking the boss. And depending on where we are in the op during the phase of the fight, one tank might be grabbing the ads, and then the next time that tank's grabbing the boss. So tanks, having a true main tank and an off tank, it kind of makes them washes. So yeah, that's it for right now. Like I said, this is just gonna be a basic guide. We'll have further in-depth guides going through. I don't know why I keep coughing so much. Probably say a bunch of Doritos in my mouth. So, not liking me right now. Other than that, fun fact, that is it for now. And hope we'll be doing more guides in the future. Like I said, 4.3, Kreyton, Public Echelon, out.